We're live, Mayor Strom.
Good evening. I call to order the virtual study session of the Lakewood City Council on March 4th, 2024 at 7:14 p.m. To connect with the council meeting, please use one of the following links at Lakewood Speaks, lakewoodspeaks.org, or lakewood.org/council videos. For online public comments this evening, you may post your public comments of any length on lakewoodspeaks.org. That's an online forum for public comments. We're leaving online public comments open during the study session and actually through 10 a.m. tomorrow morning for any comments related to tonight's presentation. So we've got two presentations this evening: separated bike lanes and metro districts. For those that would prefer to call in, you do also have the opportunity to leave a message at lakewoodspeaks.org if typing isn't how you want to voice your question, thought, or concern. And also, I'll make a quick announcement for you all. We are going to be making or trying a slight new change also this evening that will actually impact your counselors. We had a very fruitful, very exciting planning retreat that we just conducted over this weekend that you'll hear plenty more about. But in the meantime, we did have a conversation. As we've been talking about, for those of you that have been following, we are working our very best to make sure that we are providing meetings that are very efficient for our community members, that are also keeping us as effective as possible to make sure we're doing the best business that we can for the city. And so one of our conversations on Friday, as we're working through the structure of our meetings, entailed limiting council comments to 5 minutes each. So we'll be trying that out this evening. And I do promise that for those of you that have been patient as we've been working through a lot of things to try to maximize the efficiency of our meetings, we are landing on something, and we'll hope to be finishing all of that up. So we're completed hopefully by maybe the end of April or so. So thank you everybody for your patience and flexibility as we've been working through navigating, trying to make sure we're landing on the right meeting for you and the right meeting to make sure that we're getting all of the very important work done. So with that, I will go ahead and open up the meeting with a roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Strom.
Here.
Over.
Here.
Mia Guerrero.
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
Ryan.
Yes.
Charzai.
Here.
LeBure.
Here.
Nystrom.
Here.
Lowe.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
And Sinks.
Here.
Mayor Strom, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you so much. And we do have item number 3 this evening that we don't actually need to do, statement of conflict of interest. We're not having any formal business votes this evening, so we will just pass through that one. And with that, start with our first topic, separated bike lane program in Lakewood. And this evening to present on that topic, we've got our Director of Public Works, Mr. Max Kirschbaum. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Kirschbaum, who will also introduce other presenters this evening. Mr. Kirschbaum, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of City Council. The last time we spoke to City Council on this topic was prior to council elections, and since we have several things planned or already approved by previous council, we thought it would be good to revisit and bring you up to date on where we are with those plans. This evening, I'm joined by our city transportation engineer, Mike Whitaker. Mike will remain on the line for any questions you may have that he would be able to assist with. And our presenter this evening is our active transportation coordinator, Jenny Gritton. And without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Jenny to share her screen and begin the presentation.
Thank you, Max, for the introduction. Thank you, Mayor and members of City Council for taking the time to hear. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, can we all see? Great. Okay, so as Max mentioned, I'm going to be giving everyone an introduction slash update on the Lakewood Separated Bike Lane program today. It's been about a year since we last discussed this, and things stand in a different spot than they did a year ago. We have a really exciting future ahead of us, both this year and far beyond that. So we're going to be going over all of that this evening. Oh, of course it is having issues. There we go. Okay, so first, I want to begin this conversation by informing everyone why we're looking into separated bike lanes. So first off, a separated bike lane, and by the end of this presentation, hopefully we'll all have the same understanding, but a separated bike lane is any bike lane on the roadway that has some sort of vertical separation between the vehicle travel lane and the bicycle lane, whether that's bollards, whether that's plastic curbs, whether that's a concrete installation, anything, parked cars that could be separating that lane, that becomes a separated bike lane. That is a type of facility that is considered the most comfortable type of bicycle facility that can be built on a roadway, just because of that separation between the moving traffic and the cyclists. So the reason that we are looking into beginning to install this type of bike lane in the city of Lakewood is primarily understood by this nice little circle graph here from the Denver Regional Council of Governments. Kind of breaks down different types of bicyclists, you could say. This is done from a survey in 2018 of the Denver region, and it found that about 25% of people are just not interested in riding a bicycle. But out of the other 75%, we've got 4% that are highly confident. Those are your guys in spandex on Lookout Mountain. We've got 12% that are somewhat confident. And then we've got nearly 60% that we dub interested but concerned. And this interested but concerned demographic, it's the majority of the people that we have in this region. And those are the cyclists that either they want to ride their bikes or to some destinations, but something's holding them back, usually safety. And it's this demographic that if we truly want to meet Lakewood's sustainability goals of reducing vehicle miles traveled and all the environmental and social and health benefits that come with that, this 60% of the population is who we are trying to encourage to start leaving their car at home and biking once, twice, 3, 4 times a week. So these are the people that we're targeting with separated bike lanes. And the reason that we're doing that, same document, same study, did a survey of Denver region residents asking how comfortable they are riding on different types of bike facility. And I'm not going to get in the nitty gritty of all the different types, but 20% of people on a 4-lane roadway said that they were comfortable riding in a standard bike lane. That is, you have a stripe of paint and then the bike lane's right there. 20% of people said, yeah, that's good. 72% of people, when presented with the same roadway configuration, but a separated bike lane, some vertical type of separator in that buffer zone, 72%, up from 20%, said that they would ride their bike on that facility. That's a pretty significant jump. And so if we're trying to target this demographic of people who are potential bicyclists, who are people that maybe aren't riding their bikes now, but could be in the next 5 years contributing to that goal, the separated bike lanes seems, from this survey and from all the other information, it seems like a good way to kind of pull in that demographic. So just as a broad background, that is why we're doing what we're doing. And that's the vision that we keep looking at as we move forward. So this presentation is going to be covering kind of just the next year of separated bike lanes in general. But there's a lot of focus on Garrison. That's the separated bike lane that we most recently did restriping for during the annual overlay last July. And it is also a bike lane with a specific configuration that I'll get into in a couple slides. But I wanted to give a little special attention to Garrison. So why are we focusing on Garrison? Why is the first separated bike lane that we're planning on installing on Garrison Street? First off, Garrison is the most used north-south bike route in Lakewood. So this map that I have on here, this is a heat map from Strava. It's an app that people use to track their rides. It's not exhaustive data of all bike rides ever, but it gives a pretty representative sample of where people are riding. And the darker the purple line, the higher density of bicyclists we have on that route. And you can see just from this little snippet here, that Garrison, that section highlighted in yellow is the separated segment we're focusing on, but that whole corridor from top to bottom, it's really our most highly used north-south route in the entire city of Lakewood. A big part of that is because it's the only comfortable crossing of the 6th Avenue Freeway, which is the biggest barrier to bicycling in the city of Lakewood. And Garrison is one of the safest places to get past that. So that's the primary reason that we're focusing on Garrison. It has a lot of connectivity between important destinations, parks, commercial districts, schools, down to the Bear Creek Greenbelt, all the way. It's also a Jefferson County regional bike route. There's Central Bikeway that cuts all the way through several municipalities. This is our segment of it, is Garrison Street and down to Estes. Another reason that we are focusing our separated bike lane efforts on Garrison Street is because it's a major collector and the speeds are pretty high. The speed limit throughout the corridor is set to either 30 or 35 miles an hour. And that is, of course, the posted speed limit. The actual speed that cars are going does not always closely follow the posted speed limit. But with any speeds above 30 or 35 miles an hour, suddenly you start to realize that a strip of paint isn't quite enough to provide any sense of safety, any sense of comfort when you're riding your bike going 10 miles an hour next to these, giant several thousand-pound machines that are hurtling past you. So the higher the safety concern, the higher the importance to start to really increase the comfort of these bikeways. And then last but not least, it almost sounds silly, but South Garrison between Mississippi and Jewel, which is the segment that I'm going to be most focused on tonight. It was the width that we have available in the pavement is less constrained than North Garrison, especially between Alameda and Colfax. There's a lot of complications there that make installing a separated bike lane very difficult and very costly. Whereas this section of Garrison between Mississippi and Jewel was sort of low-hanging fruit, and that there's plenty of pavement width for us to kind of install the standards that we were hoping for. And it was also due for repaving in 2023. We have an annual overlay program that is scheduled due to so many different factors. And this segment of Garrison was due to be repaved last year. And so we saw that as an opportunity. And we said, while we're repaving this, let's think future forward and really take this opportunity that's right in front of us. So that's why we're focusing so much on Garrison, at least for now. So giving a quick overview of South Garrison, again, that encompasses the stretch of Garrison between Jewel Avenue and Mississippi Avenue. This map is turned sideways, so north is actually to the right, just so I could fit it on one screen. But between South Garrison, it's about a mile of road, so we've got 2 miles of linear bike lane that we're looking at. A bike lane has always existed on this road, but we're upgrading it from a bike lane to a separated bike lane in 2 different ways. We had 2 very different road contexts that really warranted 2 completely different types of bike lane. Section A is highlighted here in yellow, and you'll see that that's the majority of the South Garrison segment that is being separated. And that's what we're calling a standard bike lane. That is where you have a travel lane and you have a buffer with a vertical separation of some kind, and then you have the bike lane adjacent to the curb. That is a configuration that is very similar to traditional bike lanes that already exist. The main difference is that vertical separation. Section B that's highlighted here in teal, that is what we are calling our parking protected segment, parking protected bike lane. And that is a bit more of a complex design where it allows the existence of on-street parking and a separated bike lane by kind of switching the configuration, which I'll get into in a couple slides. It's a little more complex and there's some more complicated trade-offs, but it was really the best option as we saw fit to go through with this segment, assuming that we are able to complete separated bike lanes for the entire mile-long corridor, which was our goal. So getting into section A, that's that standard bike lane, that yellow section, the majority of our South Garrison bike lane. I've got some diagrams here. The one on the top is a traditional bike lane configuration, specifically with measurements set to South Garrison in between Florida and Mississippi. Specifically, this is where we're mostly seeing this configuration. This is the amount of road width that we have. The top diagram shows you exactly how we broke down each lane, who got what amount of space. Underneath that new configuration, it shows you with that same amount of pavement, how we borrowed a few feet here, a few feet there, and changed up the space to create that buffer, that double line between the bike lane and the travel lane, for that vertical separation to exist. So given the same amount of space, how can we change that configuration? And that's a visual representation of exactly what we have striped on South Garrison between Florida and Mississippi as of last July. And then the image on the left is a demo that we actually set up just a couple weeks ago on Denver West Parkway in an existing buffered bike lane to show the types of separation that we're considering for these first bike lanes that we're looking to install. Like I said, there are very many types of separation, very many ways to create a separated bike lane that I'm not going to get into in tonight's presentation. This is one of the more quick build ways. It's a lower initial cost of installation, some higher maintenance costs since the materials are somewhat temporary, but it's a lot more accessible than pouring concrete and getting a concrete median. There's pros and cons to every type of separation, but this image on the left shows you the realm that we are planning on going in for these next few bike lanes that we are starting to install. Now, getting into section B, the parking protected segment, that's that blue segment on South Garrison. This one is the one where the difference between the previous configuration and the new configuration is a little more drastic. So you can see that diagram on the top. Again, this is the exact width that we had to work with on South Garrison, starting with some pretty wide bike lanes. That bike lane on the left, they're 8 feet. That's a nice bike lane. We love to see that. But as the road existed before, we had bike lanes on either side, travel lane, but then we had that parking lane on the side directly adjacent to the curb. That's the condition that existed before, and that's the condition that exists on many roads throughout Lakewood. It's not an uncommon thing. The new configuration underneath it is something that is new to Lakewood, but is not new in general. We see it a lot in Denver, you're seeing it nationwide, but in Lakewood, this is the first time that we've done this design. And the main difference, as you can probably see, is in that bottom right corner. We basically switched the parking lane and the bike lane. We also borrowed a few feet from the travel lanes like we did before so that we could create that buffer space. But the main difference in this configuration is that parking lane is no longer adjacent to the curb. The bike lane is adjacent to the curb. There is a separation, and then the parking lane is directly adjacent to the travel lane. Now, the reason why we did it this way there's several reasons, but a primary reason is so that the parked cars themselves can serve as that vertical separation between the moving traffic and between the bicyclists. So the more that the cycling traffic is separated from motor vehicle traffic, the higher comfort that bikeway is, so that if a car were to veer off the road, they're not going to be hitting a bicyclist. They might be hitting a parked car. That is the vertical separation, and that's a downside of this design, but it would be protecting that cyclist from being involved in that collision. Another primary reason to switch the parking lane with the bike lane is the majority of car trips taken in the region and nationwide really are just one person in the car. And your traditional configuration in that upper diagram with the bike lane on the inside of that parking lane, you have a hazard where a motorist pulls over, they park, they get out of their car, and when they open their door, they smack a cyclist into oncoming traffic, and it doesn't look good for the cyclist. That has actually happened to me. It's not very fun, and it is something that has killed many bicyclists. With the parking lane and bike lane switched, not only do you have a much lower chance of that happening simply because many vehicles don't have passengers sitting on the right side of the car, but there's also a 3-foot buffer in between the parking lane and the bike lane to allow for that space for a passenger to open their door without smacking a cyclist. And even if they do somehow manage to hit a bicyclist with that maneuver, the bicyclist would be pushed into the sidewalk or into a grass strip adjacent to the street instead of into moving traffic. So those are the two primary reasons that we switched the configuration on the top with a configuration on the bottom. Also, if you add any type of vertical separation between the bike lane and the travel lane, but you keep the parking lane adjacent to the curb, that parking lane is no longer accessible and it kind of becomes a waste of space, right? So in order to keep the on-street parking, the last thing we want to do is take people's parking away without having a really good reason. And we saw this as a way that we could keep on-street parking and install this separated bike lane. It's a complicated design, but it's a nationally accepted design that we decided to try out in Lakewood. And so we tried it out on South Garrison. The image to the left is an example of what we have in mind. It's from Virginia, but it kind of shows basically what the final product is going to look like. If you have driven or ridden your bike or walked or live on South Garrison in the past 6 months or so, you'll see that this looks a little bit different than what we have out there. The main difference, besides the striping in the buffer, we don't have those diagonal lines. The main difference is these white posts. We call those flex posts. And they are the material that we're going to be installing, spaced every 15 feet in that buffer so that there is plenty of room for residents who park their cars to be able to safely cross through that buffer and across that bike lane. But that vertical separation marks the lane if the snow is burying the lines, and also just makes it a little more clear who's supposed to be traveling where. So going again a little bit deeper into the parking protected, just because this is the most complicated section, it's getting a little bit of extra attention. This is the only section, since we haven't installed any vertical separation in any of these lanes, this parking protected section is the only section that's technically a new configuration right now. And so we've already been able to receive some feedback about it. We've received positive feedback, we've received negative feedback, and it's already been a really good learning experience moving forward if we ever have another parking protected bike lane that we decide to install. So this image right here is our striping plan of this segment of South Garrison, just south of Iowa Avenue as it exists now. North is again pointing to the right. And this shows you it looks complicated on paper, and it was complicated to design. But you can see the buffers there. You can see the parking lane. What we ended up doing, so when we first installed this bike lane, a piece of feedback that we immediately got is there's some issues trying to turn from Iowa Avenue and Mexico Avenue. They're both very similar intersections onto Garrison. We got that feedback repeatedly from several residents. We took a look and we said, you know what, that's right. This sight distance isn't what it should be. We have engineering standards of when you're at a certain point in your car, you should be able to see a certain distance. And this isn't meeting that with these cars parked out here. So we altered the striping and added this long taper that you see with those diagonal lines in it. And I wanted to show this because it's an example of how just in the past 6 months since we changed this striping, we've already received feedback and we've been able to alter our design based on the feedback. And that's one thing that's really exciting about this separated bike lane project is ideally we get it perfect on the first try, right? Ideally we go out there, we install it and everyone's like, yes, this is perfect. There's no flaws. But that's not very realistic. But having all of these residents that live there, that drive there every day, all of these eyes on the road that reach out to us and say, you know what, something's not quite right. Having the flexibility to say, okay, how about now has been really exciting. And it's been a big learning opportunity for us. So I already went over the benefits of the parking protected. It allows for the coexistence of on-street parking and a separated bike lane. It's a physical buffer against traffic for the cyclists, and it also minimizes dooring. That's that situation where cyclist gets hit by the door. Not a fun situation for anyone involved. But there are also a lot of trade-offs with this design, right? It's not a perfect fix. One of the biggest concerns that we have heard from residents that live along this stretch where this design has been installed is that it has made it a little more difficult to get out of their driveway. And if you think about it, backing up against traffic, you used to have those cars right adjacent to the curb, and then the bike lane served as a bit of a buffer for you to see who was coming. And now with the new configuration, unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. And you have to pull up, you're in that parking lane, and you have to see who's coming behind the parked cars. At the end of the day, that lands this segment of South Garrison in the same pool as any other street that has on-street parking and does not have a bike lane. It is a complication of on-street parking. It's not a perfect system, but there's an alternative solution for some residents, and I have reached out to them and let them know. I don't know if it has worked for them or not. I haven't really received a response. But there is the option, the bike lane is wide enough that residents are able to pull out from their driveway and turn around in the bike lane, assuming, of course, that they have checked the bike lane and made sure that there's not a cyclist coming. They are able to turn through the bike lane so that then they're facing traffic. But it's not a perfect solution, so that's one of the trade-offs in this design. However, when it comes to backing out of driveways, it might be a little bit more difficult to see oncoming traffic, but it is much easier to see oncoming bicyclists. So while there was an issue before where if you're pulling out of your driveway, you look behind you, you see a parked car, you don't realize that behind that parked car, you've got a bike coming and there might be a collision. Now you have a clear, unobstructed view of any of those bikes are coming. So that's a plus. It's one of those trade-offs. Another concern that we've heard a lot about and that we thought a lot about and that we are still working to find a perfect system for, perfect quote unquote, is snow removal. And that's an issue citywide, especially with bike lanes. It gets complicated pushing snow into parking lanes, pushing snow into the bike lanes. We're working on a system right now, but we do have scaled down equipment available to plow these bike lanes specifically. It's the same equipment that we've been using to plow separated paths like the one on Alameda Avenue or down in the Bear Creek Greenbelt, smaller scale snow plows that can fit in that bike lane so that that bike lane isn't completely unusable in the winter. It is plowed by a different team than our street maintenance team. So this team actually plows it the next business day. We've been getting most of our snow events on Friday evenings, so it has not looked great over the weekend for this bike lane, and that's something that we can maybe look into improving in the future. But that's the way that it is right now. We have that scaled down equipment, and we're coming up with the best system on where to store the snow, where it's the least of an issue. Another thing that we've heard is garbage collection, and that's another thing to think about. We have reached out to all of the residents. Well, we've left flyers and notifications at 2 different points to inform the residents on this street to basically treat the buffer as a curb. So to pretend that the bike lane is just almost a part of the sidewalk, and to treat the buffer as that curb and leave their trash cans in the parking lane as if they're leaving it at that augmented curb. And if you think about it, any street that has on-street parking that does not have a bike lane, it's kind of that same configuration. You would put your trash can in what is technically the parking lane. It's just not adjacent to the curb. So that's a solution that when the bike lane was first installed, there was a lot of confusion. There wasn't great communication on our part. And over the past few months since this has changed, it's been significantly improved. And we've seen a lot more residents. Actually, the last time I drove, I didn't see any trash cans in the bike lane. I saw them all in the parking lane. So the residents have been really good about making sure that that's running smoothly. And then the last thing I already kind of touched on just to get started with this diagram, but it's that turning visibility coming out of Iowa Avenue and Mexico Avenue. And again, that was something that we actually ended up changing the design to address so that people have just as much sight distance. They actually have more sight distance now than they had before. We found out that the way that this street has been striped for the past 10 years, the sight distance did not meet our engineering standards. So with this new design, there's actually, you can see a little further down the street, even with the cars parked there, than you were able to see before. So that was an exciting improvement to be able to make. We are still responding to feedback as we go, especially since the bike lane is technically not finished yet. Once the vertical separators are installed, I'm sure you will hear more feedback that maybe we didn't think of before, and we'll have more chances to kind of play with some solutions. But this is where we stand now with the complications that have arisen with that parking protected segment just between Jewel pretty much and Iowa Avenue on South Garrison on that east side. So moving forward, that was a lot, deep in the weeds there. South Garrison, our very favorite, is anticipated for completion in early 2024. So ideally, following this presentation, following final designs that we are working on right now, we will be getting that installed, and those vertical separators will be going in time for the summer riding season, which I expect will bring another wave of feedback from bicyclists who are able to use the facility. So that is hopefully coming in the first half of this year, which is very, very exciting. And we are fortunate enough to already have that funded by traffic safety improvement funds, which is partly what we've used for the initial striping, as well as a 2024 annual budget line item that was approved last October for this separated bike lane project. And that was approved not only for South Garrison, but also for 2 other segments. So following the installation of South Garrison, which is highlighted here on this map, kind of near the bottom. We're also planning to install 2 more separated bike lanes on segments of road where a buffered bike lane, so that double line, already exists. So there's no repaving necessary, no restriping necessary, nothing changes in the configuration of the road. We're able to just add that vertical separation in that existing buffer, and then it becomes a separated bike lane. And the 2 other roads that we are looking at for 2024 that are already funded in that budget line item are a small segment of Harlan Street over on the east side, so partly in Ward 1, partly in Ward 2. Primarily because of concerns with cars parking in the bike lane. We've had complaints for years and years and years. We haven't found a good solution to get these people to stop parking in the bike lane, which is obviously a huge safety hazard. So adding those vertical separators will physically block anyone from being able to park in that bike lane, and it becomes a safety improvement for the road overall. And we're also looking to install a separated bike lane on Denver West Parkway up there in that northwest corner in Ward 1. I apologize. I said that Harlan Street was between Ward 1 and 2. I meant 2 and 3. Ooh, long night. But Denver West Parkway up there in the northwest corner is another existing buffered bike lane that was installed probably 7 or 8 years ago. And is very highly used. It's an important connection between Lakewood and Golden, and a surprisingly high volume of bicyclists are riding on Denver West Parkway. And Denver West Parkway, we are looking at, it's pretty low hanging fruit in terms of a first round of separated bike lanes, because it's a very wide buffer. It's a very simple street. You don't have on-street parking complications. You don't have a bunch of residential driveway complications like we see on South Garrison. So between these 3 separated bike lanes scattered throughout the city, each one of them has a different intent, and each one of them we are hoping to learn different things from. And this is where we are planning on beginning our separated bike lane program in 2024 and setting a strong foundation to move forward. So going forward from there, 2024 and beyond, when ideally South Garrison, Denver West, and Harlan are all installed, and we've gotten the feedback and we've gotten the designs as good as we're going to get them. From there on, it's a very exciting time. Besides all of this excitement that I've already covered, extra excitement is coming because we are actually starting to update our bicycle master plan. It has not been updated since 2018. And the bicycle master plan as it currently stands does not actually include separated bike lanes in our proposed bike network. We have a proposed bike network that's made up of bike lanes, bike lanes, shared use paths, shared roadways, and soft surface trails. And separated bike lanes are not a part of that network. And so we are going to be doing extensive public outreach. We're going to be taking a big look at our proposed bike network as it exists, what's working, what's not, a lot of spatial analysis, all sorts of good stuff is coming in the next year. We're going to be updating that bike plan. And during that process, a big part of the update, a big focus is going to be integrating separated bike lanes into that proposed network so that moving forward, we have a roadmap on where are separated bike lanes coming next and why is a big, big question. Because right now, looking at the 3 that we're installing in 2024, it might not make sense at a glance why we chose three streets. And so having a document that says, here's what we're trying to do, here's why we're trying to do it, is really, really exciting. And I'm really looking forward to getting that done. In addition to that, and alongside that, we will do kind of what we did last year with South Garrison, and always working to identify opportunities during our annual overlay program to install bike lanes or upgrade bike lanes while we're repaving the street. This significantly cuts on cost. We're doing the paving anyways. We're doing the striping anyways. So if we have the roadway configuration and we don't have to change anything or widen anything drastically, why not improve the bike lane that's already there? And always looking at those opportunities every single year, weighing all sorts of factors. What's the bicycle ridership on this corridor? How many destinations does it connect to? How many of those interested but concerned cyclists can we pull in by improving this design? How much is it going to cost to change this design? And of course, all of those specific issues, those specific externalities. Do we have to relocate utilities? Do we have to maybe change some business access? Are we going to have a bunch of residential driveways that are going to make this more complicated? All of those considerations alongside the updated bike plan coming up will inform the next 5, 10, who knows how many years of the future of separated bike lanes in Lakewood, which is very exciting. So that is what we have to look forward to. That is where things stand right now. And that is all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much.
You guys hear me now? Okay, perfect. Sorry. Mr. Kirschbaum, did you have any other speakers, or is this where we go over to council comments and questions?
That concludes our presentation. Barring any comments, we're prepared to move forward with the work on Garrison and then on the other two roadways later in the year. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And again, a reminder for the public that's listening this evening, for comments that you want to send over to City Council, LakewoodSpeaks.org is where you'll want to go. Those comments will be open until 10 a.m. tomorrow, so please feel free to share them or share the link and the opportunity with those around you that have strong feelings on this matter, one way or the other. And with that, we'll go ahead and open council comments and questions. And with the reminder that our discussion on Friday had us saying, okay, we're going to hold ourselves accountable to a 5-minute time limit. So we're going to try that tonight. And I thank everybody for your patience with that. We've got first Councilor Over and then Councilor Seeks.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jenny. Can you hear me? Yes. All right, Jay, can you bring up my slides? And by the way, I'm going to go over on time, but we'll see how it goes.
Councilor, that's actually not the way we approach it. It would be per our conversation, a previous approval would be requested, and you're asking the chair for additional time.
Let's just keep on.
I'm going to ask you to please try to limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Start it after Jay has some slides of mine. I believe he's going to bring up. Perhaps. Mr. Rob,
Sorry.
are you?
Yeah, sorry, Counselor. Give me 1 second. Kind of ran into a technical issue here. Let's... There we go. Let's see.
Bingo.
There
Okay.
we go. Thank you, Mr. Rob. And I'll note the time is 7:51.
Okay, so as Jenny pointed out, she showed us a heat map, and this is my heat map. And basically, I'm just showing you, trying to show my credentials as a bicyclist to show you that I know what I'm talking about. This is just, again, just like hers, it just shows where I've been on my bicycle in the Denver area. And so we go to the next one. Next slide, we'll try to go fast. We'll zoom in on Ward 4, which shows that actually I rode every road and every street in Ward 4, actually before I even ran for council. So I know my way around. I'm an expert. And so next slide. And what we're talking about tonight is separated bike lanes. This one is a picture taken, that's Wash Park in the distance there. That's in Denver, obviously. This is actually a very good place for a separated bike lane. It's a great idea. It works really well. It's fantastic. I've used it a bunch of times. I'm going to drop one thing. Go ahead to the next one. What we're talking about, of course, is South Garrison. And here's a picture looking north from Jewel, looking up up Garrison. I'm going to stop saying south. This was taken last year, but since then there has been some posts so that people don't think there's 2 lanes there. But you can see what's going to happen. And so we go to the next slide. And this is just closer. Okay, here's where we get into trouble with this whole idea here. Okay, you look at that car, it's parked. Okay, so imagine that those people that live there, they park their cars right there and they have to get in and out of their cars on the driver's side. And the travel lane has gone from 13 feet to 11 feet. And if you, it won't take much imagination to look at how far that door is going to open. It's actually going to open into traffic. And I've parked my car right there and I have a little SUV and looked and opened my car with nobody coming, of course. And the door swings wide enough to actually go into the travel lane. And that's the big problem I have with this whole idea here. As a bicyclist, I don't like the setup of the bike lanes on the right-hand side. But the real problem here is the danger to our residents and getting in and out of their cars. And this shows it. And exactly, just imagine getting in and out of that car. And I invite everybody to go down and park where you're supposed to park and then get in and out of your car and see just how much you love being brushed back by traffic. And like I showed, I ride with traffic all the time. So I'm one of those guys that's confident or highly confident. So let's go to the next slide. And okay, so what the people do obviously is they cheat over to the side. Now there's no dividers, no upright things in there yet, but that's where they're going. That's where they're parking, and they're parking like that because they're afraid for their safety. And I don't blame them at all. And in fact, you can see another example, that car in the back. Think about that driver's door opening. It's going to open right into traffic. And that's going to be a real problem for the owners and the people who live there. So next slide. And of course, some people were going to cheat over even more. Obviously, this guy wouldn't be able to do that when the bullets are in there. But next slide. And so here's what's already happened. There's another thing in Lakewood Speaks. Somebody mentioned that their car got hit. This is another car that got hit. And so imagine somebody getting out of their car or into their car, which they have to do all the time, and somebody comes by, traffic comes by and just smacks them. We already have evidence that this is very dangerous for the people who park here. And in fact, that's my problem, more so than the bike lane itself. So keep going. What do we have next? I'm trying to go faster. This is an old picture, but it does show the trash cans in the bike lane and people parking in the bike lane. Hang on, let me know what's coming next. Okay, the next one is the problem with coming in and out. If I'm riding, obviously I've ridden this. You can see the car to the left is parked, the white car is moving, and I'm supposed to be going along and then swing out toward the moving cars. And that's a huge problem for bicyclists because we want drivers to know exactly where we're going, how fast we're going. We don't want to be unpredictable. And so here we're supposed to come up the bike lane, then swing out right next to traffic, go across the intersection and swing back. It's a bad idea because we want drivers to not run us over, not door us. And so we don't want them to be afraid of us or hate bicyclists. And that's what happens when you do strange things in front of them. If they know what you're going to do, they're fine with us. If they don't know what we're going to do, they're not okay. It makes them nervous. It makes them jittery, and it just decreases our safety. So I would never go swinging out like the green stripes show. I would go straight through. And of course, here's the other thing: is I'm tall enough. If I'm riding along next on the right side of these parked cars, somebody in traffic can see me riding. But think about kids. shorter kids and cars parked along there. The cars out on the travel lanes aren't going to be able to see shorter riders. So we want to do this for all the different riders that are possible, but we're making it more dangerous at certain times. So go ahead to the next lane. And so here's my biggest problem with this whole thing is we're spending money to make this Cadillac of a bike lane. And, I do like separated bike lanes, but just not here. Because look at this. This is Garrison looking south.
Counselor, if you could wrap up, we've got other counselors here. I gave you a couple extra minutes. If you could wrap up, we'd appreciate
Sure
it.
thing. My point is
Thank
here
you.
that where's the bike lane? There is no bike lane south on Garrison. So we're spending money on a Cadillac bike lane to the north of Jewel, and we don't have anything south of Jewel. And so therefore, that's why it's, it's spending money unwisely. It's like, it's serving caviar in one place when somebody else is living on rice and beans. It's building a super highway for a couple of blocks, and you have a dirt road for a couple other extra blocks. And so it's penny wise, it's pound foolish. I don't like the whole idea. And the worst part, of course, of summing up is that the people who live there are now in danger of getting hit a lot more than they were before. We're supposed to be looking at like zero vision or vision zero, I forget, the national program to cut down on traffic fatalities, car pedestrian accidents, and we're going to be increasing it here in Lakewood along this stretch in the name of bicycle safety. And as a bicyclist, I don't want my name on that. And I feel really bad for the people that have to live there. So thank you, Mayor. I actually did go 8.5
Thank
minutes,
you.
but
Thank
Jenny
you.
had 29 minutes, so.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Sinks.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for all the work that Public Works have done on this. It's a start. We can't do everything all at once, can we? And so I heard and I saw on the slide that you would develop a network of proposed separated lanes during 24 and 25. I wonder if you would speak to that. And as you speak to it, if you would also talk about the east-west connectivity that you'll work on to develop.
Absolutely. So a big part of our development of a proposed network of separated bike lanes is going to lean heavily on public engagement. So we are doing a lot of public engagement this summer and a second wave later, probably late 2024 that isn't scheduled yet, to reach out to the cycling community, to reach out to Lakewood residents who are getting around by any mode of transportation, to figure out what destinations are we trying to connect and what's the safest way we can connect them. And depending on the context of the road and of the surrounding network, is a separated bike lane appropriate? For instance, like I pointed out, Garrison is a very important north-south connection, and that will likely be a proposed separated bike lane for the future installation. In terms of east-west, just looking primarily at usage, where are cyclists already riding? Florida Avenue is it's a road of interest for sure. It connects all the way east into Denver to the South Platte River Trail, almost. It crosses the I-25, which is a big barrier. And for recreational road cyclists, it's a very highly used connection up into Green Mountain and further on into Golden. So that is one that we already have our eye on. 20th and 26th Avenue are very, very popular connections for bicyclists, again, between Golden and Denver for that inter-municipal connectivity. Alameda Avenue, we've got that separated bike path. So that's a situation where looking at our network as a whole, a separated bike lane isn't going to be our move there because we've already got a facility that is welcoming for those interested but concerned cyclists. So looking at where are people getting from point A to point B, where are people already riding? And then, of course, community destinations such as schools, recreational centers, parks, any kind of trails are going to kind of rank a segment higher per se. So all of that is part of what's going to be going into that process.
Great. And if I might, Mayor, I don't know where my time is. Just one other question for
You're good.
Jenny, and that is, so again, it's a small segment of Harlan. And of course, I imagine these small segments will be expanded. And can you talk about the good that will be done in a small segment, like training people, training the residents, or what else do you have about that?
You know, training it's an interesting word to bring up because you're kind of right. A small segment looking at connectivity isn't going to do much, right? What's the point of having a separated bike lane for 5 feet? You know, it's a Cadillac of a bike lane while other people are getting, what was it, rice and beans. But it not only does it familiarize residents who are driving past these sections with the concept, but the idea is that in the short term, it's piecemeal so that in the long term, it can be a connected network. Often the way that funding happens, the way that projects are built, and again, resurfacing processes like that, you put things together piece by piece over a series of years so that by the end of a 5-year, 10-year period, you have this nice connected bike lane that started with this tiny piece. So Harlan Street is an example. Harlan is a little tricky because it dead ends at 6th Avenue. We are hoping to change that someday. That is also a recommendation in the bike plan, but that is a whole other conversation. But I would like to see Harlan also appearing on the proposed network for separated bike lanes because of its north-south connectivity over in wards 2 and 3. So that's a good example of that. Thank you.
And thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. And Councilor Mayotte Guerrero.
Thank you so much. I want to just say that I had, as you were presenting, listed questions, and I want to just compliment your order of operations because it was like every time I had a question, like say about snow plowing, the next slide was handling it. And so you answered a tremendous amount of my like concerns and questions that I've gotten about that particular area and that particular setup throughout that presentation. So thank you very much for your thoroughness. I just have one question. You kind of touched on this, but I just want to make sure that we get it really dialed, which is targeting new cyclists, right? This like sort of unsure, I'd like to cycle more, I'd like to cycle at all, but I'm nervous about it, is really great. But I also just want to clarify that also targeting bike safety in general, right? That we're using, yes, best practices that appeal to people, that make people feel like they will be welcome on the street, but also things that we do in fact have evidence to show reduce injury to cyclists over time.
Absolutely, yes. And both of them are definitely things that we're taking into consideration. The focus on that interested but concerned demographic is kind of specific to why we're focusing on this type of infrastructure. But ideally, a separated bike lane is seen as an upgrade from a traditional bike lane, right? And that upgrade is mostly in part of safety. Some bicyclists don't prefer the curbside configuration, especially with parking protected. They feel like they lose some visibility, some mobility. And if they're very confident they can ride in the travel lane, and if they feel safe doing that, then we're not affecting their sense of safety whatsoever. But separated bike lanes, even though they're somewhat new, in the United States, they've probably only been around for maybe 10, 15 years. There's already a lot of academic literature as well as governmental entities have put out their studies before and after on not only increased bicycle volumes, which is a focus that I kind of emphasize, but also a decreased rate of crashes related to bicycle volumes. Sometimes the overall rate of crashes actually increases when a separated bike lane is installed because the bike lane volume goes up 400% and the crash rate goes up 50%, which if you're looking at the rate per cyclist is actually an improvement, but the rate overall is higher. So it's a little tricky to gauge, but from the research that I've been able to do so far, and I'm always looking for the newest, latest research, we have found pretty overwhelming evidence that separated bike lanes are a safety improvement, not only for the cyclists, but also for drivers adjacent to those separated bike lanes, as they often serve as a traffic calming method that slows cars down and kind of makes everyone aware of everyone else on the road. So that's what we're hoping to see on South Garrison and in Lakewood in the future as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Counselor LeBeer, then we'll have Counselor Nystrom, and then Counselor Cruz.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Well, I just wanted to make a couple comments because, I ride my bike down Garrison. I live right off of Garrison, so I'm navigating a lot of these stretches quite often. And I will say I frequently ride my bike on the sidewalk because I do feel unsafe. So it is nice to have protected bike lanes. I'm glad we're working towards trying to make that happen. So I just want to make that comment. That being said, I do see some of the challenges that the residents are talking about on this particular stretch. It is a bit awkward, and I will say not only that, but I also wanted to mention that I appreciate you mentioning that you're taking a look at it, and you guys are continually trying to reassess and figure out the best strategy to make this section better. And I hope that work continues. And I also just wanted to point out that on Florida and Garrison, the intersection there, the painting there is just a little weird. And I mean that not from the bike part, but just the intersection. It almost feels like it shoots the car into the oncoming traffic, and it's a little awkward right there. And I hope staff takes a look at that at some point. I don't know if that's been something that's been noticed or pointed out. But one thing I did want to mention in terms of a policy, I think when there are complicated things to navigate, like this particular section, I think one thing that needs to happen is we need to have a policy of reducing the speed in that area, because I think that's one of the challenges. The speed limit's 35 miles an hour. And I think the challenge is that cars are probably driving 45 miles an hour because it's a 35 mile an hour zone. So I think if we can reduce the speed in these type of complicated navigation areas, that would go a long way to help people get in and out of their driveways and the trash haulers and all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to make those comments. I think I got everything I wanted to say. So yeah, so just wanted to share that with you all. Thanks.
Counselor Nystrom.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm really happy that this is a project that's underway. I am also a cyclist, but I don't commute on my bike because I work from home now. And I recently bought a gravel bike because I don't like riding on the roads. So I'm going to try to transition to that as much as possible. I also have the ability to drop into the green space and ride up to Bear Creek Lake Park and then go from there. But I do have some concerns with that section of Garrison that you spoke about and that others have talked about. If you're looking for some contacts, there's a lot of comments on Lakewood Speaks. I think there's a lot of residents there that, cyclists or not, they do have legitimate concerns about the safety. And I personally, I'm really looking forward to being able to ride up Garrison all the way north when these bike lanes are completed. But I personally avoid that area on my bicycle right now because it does make me very uncomfortable. I prefer to ride in the lane of traffic in most of that section. But then you're also, running the risk of getting doored. So, I applaud the work that you're doing, and I think you guys are making a great effort at this. But I would really sit down with those residents and revisit that as soon as you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Cruz.
Thank you. Yeah, and just want to echo my fellow counselors' gratitude for the presentation. And for all of this work, again, as a cyclist, but maybe more on the northeastern side of our city. I am really excited for the implications that this process has for increasing safety and ridership across the city. I think I just had a couple of questions. I know some of my fellow counselors kind of brought up concerns around speed on some of these areas. I know that was kind of a main concern with some of the residents who wrote in, concerned about parking kind of in that kind of parking lane outside of the separated bike lane. So just curious, if there are plans or other means that could help kind of slow traffic in some of these areas to kind of mitigate some of the concerns regarding speeds for some of those folks in those parked cars and in the bike lane.
Absolutely. So there's two things that we really have in mind for this segment, and then we'll go from there depending on how well those actually pan out in reality. The first is that Lakewood and Jefferson County are working together on a countywide, Safe Streets for All safety plan. And that is going to kind of revisit a lot of the speed limits in the city. Especially there's parts of Garrison that are 30 miles an hour and part that are 35, and there's literally no reason why those two are different when you look at the road design and things like that. That study that's hopefully going to be taking place over the next year or two with Jefferson County are going to be revisiting speed limits. And so that might be a vehicle where we reduce the posted speed limit. In terms of reducing the actual speed, as Councilman LeBure mentioned, that the posted speed limit and the actual speed aren't always the same. We are hoping to find a traffic calming effect, kind of like I mentioned briefly earlier. Once we get the vertical separation installed, it kind of narrows the field of vision, but not in an unsafe way, right? But psychologically, when you have a narrower road, you're going to drive a little slower. And that segment of Garrison, the parking protected segment especially, but kind of this whole segment that we're looking at, it's a pretty wide road. And when you're on a wide road, you might not care what the speed limit is. You're going to drive at a speed that feels like it makes sense, and a high speed makes sense. And hopefully with those vertical separators, a lower speed will start to make a little bit more sense. We have taken some speed studies from Garrison as it stands now, as it stood before, and we're going to be taking more after the separation is installed, and we're going to see if we can see a reduction in that speed. We're hoping that we will. And if we don't, we're going to move from there on other ways to look into traffic calming.
Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. And I'll be really curious, especially because I totally get that there has to be incremental progress with some of these separated bike lanes, some of this infrastructure. But if you're like speeding at one part of Garrison and then you come and then you're like, oh no, I think it can be hard for people to adapt. So we'll be really curious kind of like what that seems like. I think the other kind of question that I had was, do you all anticipate with kind of the installation of some of these vertical barriers that because I know that there was some mention of confusion around where the parking was or what was a lane, or like how in kind of the stuff that you all are tweaking and figuring out, do you see that becoming clearer to residents and users over the next couple of months?
I do. I really do. And even since the initial striping, we have added a couple more signs here and there. We've done things very incrementally, which isn't the ideal way to do things, but that's the way that this has been done. And it is what it is at this point. But between the signage and the flex posts, I do think that it will become very clear visually where cars are supposed to be, where bikes are supposed to be. I think it'll kind of visually shift that curb like I was talking about with the trash can placement. I think it'll really demarcate the roadway. Here's where cars go, here's where cars don't go. And I think that it'll make it a lot clearer than it was when we first striped it, and even clearer than it is right now.
Great. That's super helpful. And just before I close, just want to emphasize that I think that this project is super important. Really appreciate all of the work that you all have put into adjusting to folks' comments and concerns, and hope that will continue. And am really excited about the expansion of this project into Harlan Street, my ward, and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Stewart and then Councillor Wright.
Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. I deeply appreciate it, and I'm very, very excited to be living in the first year that we actually had budgeted for bike lanes, and bike lanes popping up in Lakewood for the very first, protected bike lanes popping up in Lakewood for the first time. So super thrilled about that. Just excited to see more progress, obviously. And so I'm extraordinarily supportive of what we're doing moving forward. I do want to highlight, though, I know the last time we had this conversation, we were all kind of talking about how to prioritize moving forward and prioritizing large arterial connectivity, and kind of, do we prioritize some of the easier spaces to just restripe? And, do we just completely go along with our street resurfacing? And I just do want to highlight and emphasize my support for the idea of thinking a little bit bigger, like it sounds like we are doing, around kind of getting a really big north-south and a couple big east-west connections that allow people to go from one municipality to the other and cross the entire city. I know that is a little bit potentially more expensive in some ways than just going along with our restriping plan slowly but surely, but would really encourage us to think about really investing in a couple of really large, border to border protected lanes. So no question in there. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited about all of this.
Thank you.
Councilor Ryan.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. And I like that it sounds like your team is being flexible as you go along and trying to learn as we go on how we can improve some things. And I think a number of things have come up either from our residents or from some of the remarks that others have made tonight. And I'm wondering what kind of follow-up we're going to have. I mean, what kind of formal study, if you will, or formal follow-up that you'll have on this so that we can find out what those best practices are and how we can continue to modify.
That's a great question. I think my number one resource would be pointing towards the project website. So we created a project website for separated bike lanes on Lakewood Together last year at the end of July, right when the restriping on South Garrison happened, so that the residents there had a resource to kind of look into why it was happening and had a place to ask questions. And we promoted that website when it first happened, and we haven't really promoted it since because the project's been in a little bit of limbo since then. But I'm actually going to be updating that project website this week. It's at lakewoodtogether.org/separated bike lanes. And that would be kind of the best place for residents to check in with any updates. That's going to tell you where we are, what we've done, what it looks like, what we're doing next, but then also any major changes that happen. If we do change any configurations or if we hear resounding feedback, that would be available on that site. Whenever a resident reaches out with a specific concern that we are able to address within a timely manner, we usually reach back out to them and let them know that their concern has been addressed. For instance, the few residents that called and wrote in with a concern about visibility when they were turning off of Iowa or Mexico Avenues, as soon as we changed that configuration and kind of widened that site distance, we reached back out to every single one of those residents to let them know, hey, I just wanted to update you. We did hear you and we've made this change. I hope that it improves things. And I think that they really appreciated that. So with specific things, we keep in contact with those residents, but overall that project website will probably be the best place to start.
And if I may, to the extent your website can, or some other aspect can do this, to the extent you can track things objectively so that we can see, here's what we believe estimates of bike use on this corridor may have been. What are we seeing now? What are we seeing in terms of accidents in this area? What type of, to the extent you can build in some objective measures that you can study, not only this, but as you build it out, that we can see a base versus where we are moving forward. I think that would be helpful for us on city council and making decisions about how fast we might want to accelerate or decelerate the building of these things, and also for our residents. So that's just a comment at the end there. Thank you very much for all your work on this.
Thank you. Yeah, and we are keeping track of that data. Maybe I'll make a report. I don't know. Ideas are flowing. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Shahrazadi.
Yeah, thank you. Great. I'll echo everyone else. Great presentation. I don't have a lot of questions. I know that this is meant to be an update and really appreciate to hear sort of the nimbleness and responding to communities' requests for looking at things a little bit differently and seeing how we apply that to future projects Similar to Councilor Cruz, I'm excited to see one of the next projects in my ward. I know that we've heard a lot for that, and I will just take this opportunity every time we talk about bicycles to advocate for North Garrison, the route to Lakewood High School, and then also 20th. Those are areas that are heavily trafficked. We've got some safe routes to school funding, I think, for 20th Avenue. And I know that we are responsive to when striping and things like that are coming into play, but I'd also advocate for us prioritizing those areas that we've heard tremendous outreach about and that would have the highest return on safe investment to travel. And so just advocating for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lowe.
Yes, I'll echo everyone else. Ms. Gritton, right? Gritton. Gritton. Thank you so much for this presentation. Gritton. Yeah, really helpful. I just want to echo, and I think we've actually heard this unanimously from every member of council. In general, protected bike lanes are a good thing. Those who heard me at the retreat talk about evidence-based policies. This is an evidence-based policy. Ms. Gritton clearly knows and talked a lot about this and presented some of the data. But I mean, I was researching this a little bit in preparation for the study session. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that protected bike lanes reduce injuries and death, increase bike ridership, reduce carbon impact. Even some evidence that they are good for local businesses because people are more, at least in more commercial areas, which admittedly Garrison is probably less so. Folks are more prone to spend money on local businesses. So I think protected bike lanes are a really good thing. It's really exciting to see this moving forward in Lakewood, and I just want to underscore that. I do agree with Councilor Stewart's comment that yes, this is amazing, and we want to also stay on top of this big picture that we need more connectivity, more north-south, more east-west. I think that's a huge priority. It's something we've heard over and over again. I do think this conversation highlights something that I've heard from a number of Ward 3 residents, which is concern about car speeds and speeds generally on certain residential arteries. Something I heard a lot about from residents in our ward on the doors and in conversations in the community over the last year. So A, to the extent that protected bike lanes help with that, I think that's a good thing. And B, on the concern just more generally about bike safety, about car park safety, I think it's worth not maybe tonight, but soon looking at other options for some of these big arteries, residential street arteries to help with car speed, because it's something we've heard a lot about from the community. I looked again at Lakewood Speaks. We got, as of 5 minutes ago, we had 37 comments. By my count, 7 folks had some concerns. They certainly seem like very legitimate concerns. I want to get to that. And 30 folks spoke in support and were very supportive of protected bike lanes. So I mean, Lakewood Speaks is not a perfect sample, but the comments overwhelmingly going into the study session were supportive of protected bike lanes. All that being said, I do want, Ms. Gritton, I wonder if you could, I would love to hear you just address a couple of points that Councilor Oliver did, I think, raise very fairly in his presentation. With this specific stretch, what about some of the concerns about these cars being parked next to the bike lanes, potentially being too close to ongoing traffic? I mean, certainly that's obvious. That is something we've heard from a couple of residents about. Is there anything else we can do about that with this stretch? And what lessons can we take from this if we're rolling out more protected bike lanes in other corridors to try to minimize that? It does strike me like there's some amount of baked in challenge here, right? If you're going to have a bike lane and then cars parked and then throughways, I mean, there's always going to be this challenge of if someone opens a car door, they either do it into a bike lane that has its own problems, or they're going to do it in oncoming traffic, and that creates its own problems. Is there anything that we can do on that? And the one other point he raised, like, I don't think any of us would want in building out protected bike lanes to not be sort of pushing connectivity. So how can we make sure that, to the point that Councilor Olver raised, that we're not doing a couple of, quote, Cadillac projects at the expense of a larger connectivity strategy? Maybe you could sort of speak to those 2 points.
Absolutely. So in terms of the parking next to the travel lane, I hear these residents loud and clear because I have lived on very, very many streets where the on-street parking, there's no bike lane. It's just on-street parking and 2 travel lanes. And I park my car directly adjacent to the travel lane. I have been doing that as long as I have been driving a car, and it is uncomfortable. I have learned over time to open my door a little bit of a crack and make sure no one's going to come whack my door off. And that's just not ideal. And I hate that the short answer is that is going to be the reality on that street with this design as long as it stays in place. But the good news is one thing we were able to do in South Garrison is a typical parking lane in the city of Lakewood is actually 8 feet wide as per our engineering standards. And we had enough road to keep this parking lane at 10 feet. I know those extra 2 feet, a car door is larger than 2 feet, but those extra 2 feet do provide more wiggle room than a typical Lakewood street might have for those residents getting out of their car to have some kind of buffer between them and oncoming traffic. The reality is that cars move too fast on Garrison. And out of all of the comments that we've gotten, that's the number one concern we've heard because every safety concern is tied to that. But those extra 2 feet or something, and that kind of gives us an idea moving forward. Maybe if we were to do this again, maybe we could take a foot away from the bike lane and give that parking lane an extra foot and give a 3 feet buffer. That's something, again, that we're taking moving forward. Not many roads are quite as wide as this segment of Garrison, so those opportunities may be more limited in the future. But again, if we had another identical twin to South Garrison, that is one thing that we could potentially do differently, is making that parking lane a little wider and making that a little more comfortable for the residents. But right now, as it stands, those residents have gotten used to the luxury of having a bike lane kind of serve as their own personal buffer. And that is not the configuration of the roadway anymore. And now it parallels the experience of any other street that has on-street parking and does not have a bike lane. So it's an adjustment for sure. And I absolutely understand that it's not very comfortable. But again, that is something in the future we might be able to do differently. And at the end of the day, I would rather have a car run into a parked car than into a human being on a bicycle. And it's a really tough trade-off. But I think in terms of safety, it is hopefully the correct choice on this corridor. In terms of long-term connectivity, Councilman Olver's point on Garrison on either side of Jewel specifically is a great example because we have this great separated bike lane. It's wide, it's newly painted, it's fresh, and then you cross the street and there's not a bike lane. There's a path on the side of the road, but paths are not for everyone and they come with their own challenges. And so that is definitely something, and Councilor Stewart and everyone's connectivity comments are definitely something that we're hoping to emphasize in this bike plan update, which is part of why we really want to get this proposed network of separated bike lanes so that we have a long-term vision going forward. We will probably, when there is overlay opportunity, move with that. But ideally in the future, the number one thing holding us back from those big connected north, south, east, west connections is funding, right? It's the complications, it's the expense that comes with road widening is the reality. North Garrison specifically has been called out and it's just not wide enough to fit a separated bike lane. It's going to be expensive, but it's something that we're going to get done one of these days. But it's really just about chasing down those funding sources, applying for grants, really anything that we can do to make those big projects happen. That's what's not happening now. Councilor Stewart mentioned it's very exciting to be living in the first year that bike lanes have ever had a specific budget item. And that has been our reality in the city of Lakewood is bicycle projects have not been funded. And maybe someday that'll change and that'll really contribute towards being able to fund these really aggressive, big connected projects. I hope I touched on both your questions. I went really deep there.
No, thank you, Ms. Gritton. And I just want to reiterate again, my support for the work you're doing. It's exciting to see the progress you're making. I think Lakewood's lucky to have someone with your energy and passion for this topic working on this. And I hope we can continue to build on this in our budget and in our staff and in our city.
Thank you so much.
All right, before we kick off our second round, I want to just also echo all the appreciation for the work that the entire Public Works team has done. I know this is so complicated, and I want to, as a former Ward 5 city councilor in this area that we've been speaking a lot about in Garrison tonight, just want to be very grateful that you guys have been so responsive to community input. And looking back, the idea of evaluating or reevaluating to make changes and improvements, things that you guys have been doing, and and also working to communicate with residents. Want to say thank you. And I think that incremental approach that you've been doing is actually kind of nice because it allows us to kind of, the public starts to see a reset. We see a change, we slow down, hopefully, and we continue to build on that incremental change. So just wanted to give a big, shout out. I know that this is really complicated and it does, for those impacted homes that are having shifts to how they pull out of driveways and where they park in front of their houses, it's not easy. And I appreciate the work that you guys have been doing to try to make it easier. With that, Councilor Over, you have your hand up again? You do? Okay.
Yes,
Councilor
I do.
Over.
Okay, thank you. I was going to move on to, I had more slides, but we don't need to bring them up because I can say this fairly quickly. I was going to talk about the Denver West Parkway. It actually, I don't like the Garrison one, but the Denver West is a very good spot to have something like this, if you want to pay for it. And I wouldn't in this case, because I believe you were wrong before about saying it's a big place. There's a lot of bicycles on Denver West Parkway, only if they work there, because it's a road to nowhere. When I did my slides last year, I showed you that Denver West is a great spot. There's now a new, very nicely painted lines and if we put in separators, that'll be a good thing, except for the money. But the trouble is, it doesn't go anywhere. That road, it goes to NREL, and NREL does not allow bicycles to go through their property, and so nobody's going to Golden that way. I mean, I have ridden it, but once you get up there, you have to go across and go down Colfax. But no. Nobody's going down Colfax. Nobody's going down the sidewalk on Colfax. The way I do it is I go through the parking lots behind Whole Foods or World Foods, it is right there, and the other things. And then that has its problems because people are not looking out for you when they're driving through parking lots. They don't expect bicyclists at all. So again, the danger increases. Or you can go cross country, literally on a path, literally on dirt. And that becomes a real problem in the fall when it's goat head season. And so then you're dealing with flats and nobody wants to do that. And so we do not have a path from 20th Street through Denver West to Golden, and we should. Have you been talking? Here's a question. The way we have to go now, bicyclists goes are north of Table Mountain, north of South Table Mountain. There's two routes. And it'd be great if we actually had a route on the south side of Table Mountain. Have you talked to NREL about why in the world the National Renewable Energy Lab doesn't allow bicycles and blocks us from getting to Golden? Have you talked to them or talked to Golden about completing that loop? Or that, you can't get there from here, basically, is the problem.
So I have not personally talked to NREL about that connection, but my predecessor, Christina Lane, who now works for Jefferson County, I know that she has been in talks with them several times over. The tricky thing about NREL is that it's actually federal property. So you have your classic, oh, that's not our road, that's CDOT's road, that's in Wheat Ridge, that's in Golden, that's not in any of them. That's actually federal property, which adds an extra layer of bureaucratic nightmare into getting that connection. But the short answer to your question, why doesn't NREL allow bikes through? I don't know, but I do know that a lot of bikes go through anyways, and it sounds like you might be one of them. Based on our Strava heat map, we do see really high usage on Denver West. Where these people are going, maybe we don't know, but they are definitely riding there, and we plan to do some counts of our own as well.
The heat map would show people going to work there because they can go in. But no, I have tried and I've been turned back and I've tried again and I've tried to sneak and they don't like that at all. So yeah, trust me. But yeah, so that wraps it up for what I had, except I do have a solution We do not spend enough money on bicycle safety, or not safety, but bicycle routes. To me, the only way we're actually going to get anywhere is if we have a bond, issue a bond for transportation. I would do it for all of transportation and actually lay out where we want to do our connectivity. Obviously, Garrison north-south is major, but there's some spots like Alameda and Alameda and Garrison, of course, is a death trap for bicyclists. I mean, we need to spend money there. There's some other places I could point out. Obviously, I have already. You talked about Harlan. It'd be great to have either a bridge over top of 6th Avenue or a tunnel underneath it. But that, with Lakewood's budget, we're never going to do it. Certainly not in my lifetime, and probably not in the grandkids' lifetime of any of the counselors right here. The way we're going with just doing some line paving or line painting when we repave. I mean, we have to bump up the priorities of these things, or it's never going to get done. And so I'd certainly be behind talking about a bond for bicycle connectivity routes, and I would throw it all in as also transportation. It's a totally separate topic, but as Whit knows, I like the idea of paying more money for more smart red lights. But that's a different topic, and so sorry to bring it up. But yeah, I think the solution for all this is a bond, so that we actually can put some money into the streets and make it safe all the way through. So that's my 2 cents worth. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Council. And thank you so much to your Public Works team for being here tonight. And Director Kirschbaum, I lost his face. People are moving around too much. Thank you, everybody. And we'll go ahead and start to transition over to our next topic this evening, Metro Districts. So for Metro Districts, we will take the microphone and hand it over to our Planning Director, Travis Parker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Let me share my screen and we'll talk for a few minutes about Metro Districts. Everything's frozen. Are you seeing a presentation?
Not yet, it says starting.
My computer has frozen. I apologize. Is there a way to kick off that existing screen share and start over?
Or let me try to pull it up, Travis.
Are you seeing the presentation? Or how's that?
Yep, got it.
My apologies. Yep. All right, so we're here tonight to talk about Metro Districts. Just as a very simple background, we have a lot of existing districts in Lakewood right now, and there's really limited option under state law for the city or the city council to have an impact on existing districts. These are quasi-judicial governments with elected boards that have already been created. So state law really allows them to continue. The only real review that the city council has over existing districts comes when there's a material change to the district. So if they're proposing something that's significantly different from their original service plan. So really our opportunity to regulate or have an impact on districts comes with proposed new metro districts. And so that's the discussion that's taken place over the last couple of years. And that's the bulk of the proposals in front of you tonight. So the city council has an obligation under state law to review the service plan for new metro districts that are proposed in the city of Lakewood. As of right now, the city doesn't have any existing criteria, standards, or procedure passed by which to judge or review those districts. So in 2020, under the auspices of the Development Dialogue Committee, the city started looking at procedures and review criteria for new metro districts. The Development Dialogue had 3 public meetings about this, and then sent recommendations to City Council. So throughout 2021, City Council had 3 study sessions, and then finally a hearing in October 2021 about potential new regulations on metro districts and criteria for newly approved metro districts. Ultimately, the council did not take any action. So no new regulations were approved in 2021. And today, council has asked to relook at those. And so the things that we'll be looking at tonight are the output of those conversations in 2020 and 2021 through the Development Dialogue Committee and the full City Council. I'm going to look at about 5 slides that give large categories of changes that were proposed in 2020 and 2021. These categories include improving disclosure of information about an upcoming metro district or an existing metro district, requiring a transition of the board from developer control to end user or resident control, avoiding excess profits, limiting debt of the new district, and then some miscellaneous other provisions that were proposed. And I should note that since 2021, there have been some changes to state law that have impacted some of these areas. So I'll call that out as we go through, that some of the proposals that were made in 2020 and 2021 may no longer be necessary because of subsequent changes to state law. So starting with improving information disclosure, the recommendation of the Development Dialogue Committee and ultimately the City Council was a 1-page simple language disclosure on every property in a metro district. So in newly formed metro districts, this disclosure would have to be created, it would have to be recorded on every property, and then presented for signature at every property transaction. And there were a number of sub-recommendations about penalties for non-compliance and that sort of thing. But the general recommendation here is a very simple, clear disclosure on every property transaction in the metro district to let people know that they're in a metro district, what their obligations are, both now and potential obligations in the future as a resident of that metro district. The second area of recommended changes is requiring a transition of the board. So metro districts have an elected board, and necessarily when a metro district is created, all of the property in that district is owned by one entity, generally the entity that's going to develop that property. And so the first board is necessarily made up of representatives of that developer. And there is clearly some interest on the part of the future owners and maybe of the city to have that board transition as quickly as possible to control of the end users or the residents that ultimately live in that metro district. And so while state law controls when elections take place and how elections take place, the idea that was kicked around by the Development Dialogue Committee and the City Council in 2020 and 2021 was to require when the new metro district is created that the developers' representatives sign a commitment to resign at a certain point. So either after a certain time frame or when development reaches a certain level. So that is the second category of recommendations that were considered. The third is avoiding excess profits. This included such things as a maximum interest rate, limiting the interest rates on loans to the district, and limiting or prohibiting reimbursement agreements. This has largely been solved by subsequent state law. Senate Bill 23-110 was passed last year that limits the interest rate on debt for metro districts to lower at or lower than market rate, limits the maturity of debt for these districts to not more than 40 years. And so handles a lot of the issues and concerns that were raised by City Council in this area back in 2021. City Council may still want to take some action in this area, but we should re-examine what the original recommendations were because I think they've been handled by the state. In terms of limiting debt, the council talked about perhaps establishing a maximum initial debt limit and limiting future debt to a board that's controlled by residents rather than developer representatives, and limiting the Tabor exemption. So there's a necessary Tabor election at the creation of the district, but perhaps limiting the scope of that initial Tabor election and requiring future Tabor elections or an expansion of the Tabor provisions in that first election, limiting those to future boards controlled by end users or residents of the district. And then finally, there were a number of other miscellaneous provisions discussed by the council in 2021 for potentially requiring with a new metro district a pro forma of the development and or a contingency plan for what the development would look like if the metro district was not approved. Requiring periodic reports, either annually, biannually, from the district on their financial status, limiting the ability of that metro district to do eminent domain and take property through eminent domain. Eminent domain is something that's allowed by metro districts, but could through city legislation be limited or have a requirement to go through city council for that sort of action. And finally, there was a proposal to limit multi-district structures that could consolidate control of multiple metro districts in one developer controlled area. So by limiting that, it leaves these metro districts so that they are eventually controlled by end users or residents of those districts. That's a very short, very high level overview of the types of changes that were proposed in 2020 and 2021. There is a lot more detail in the memo that was put on Lakewood Speaks for this meeting. And there are a number of memos that have been previously sent to council with the past information from 2020 and 2021. I am available tonight to talk through these issues, answer questions. Anything that I can't answer, we will take down and get answers to council as soon as possible. If council provides us guidance to move forward tonight, there will be an ordinance drafted with some or all of these changes, and then first and second public hearings as an ordinance to make any potential changes.
Thank you, Director Parker. I was reading, I apologize, I did not see whose hand was up first. We'll go with Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem Shahrizai, since Councilor Over had the floor the last time. So I'm going to go in order of Shahrizai, Over, Stewart, Spinks, and then LeBure.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate this additional information. I think for those of us who were on council over the summer when metro districts came up, again, we had a metro district start that process to form. And a lot of us felt like, whoa, this is moving quickly. We need more information. And so I'm glad that that ended up getting pulled. And I'm really thankful that we have an opportunity to revisit the great work that already happened. And so, that October vote in 2021 was hard to watch. And I think that it's helpful to understand the additional context of, appreciate you sharing like the development dialogue and all the work that they did. It's my understanding from the meeting notes and the conversations that were had in those forums that the hesitation and the no vote was a result of a desire to see something happen at the state level in regulation. and we can wait all day for that. So, for me, I think it's important for us to look at what we can do to increase the ability to regulate these and to put power back into the neighbors, taking it away from the developers. And additionally, there were 2 counselors who were absent that night. So it wasn't a full council voting. So there's just some other things to understand why this did fail when it originally came around. And I think for ultimately where I stand, I'm really in favor of us having this conversation, reviewing some of the work that's already happened. Because I think we are going to see Metro District applications come again, and I would be uncomfortable not having some regulations in place. And I would hate to see us punt this again and wait for our peers at the state legislature to sort of regulate when we have that capability and a great body of work to review. So no real question there, just a comment. Thank you.
Councilor Ofer.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm certain we're going to see Metro districts come again, especially certainly at the Federal Center, right, Mr. Parker? We'll probably get a Metro districts on that the northwest corner of the Federal Center, and so having these things in place. Yeah. So when I think of this, I think of what went wrong in Solterra, because I've definitely heard about that because it's in Ward 4, and the people there have complained because and it sounds like we're trying to work on that because they're complaining that the developer made sweetheart deals with themselves, and they made sweetheart deals with long-term deals with their buddies, and we're trying to limit that. So I really applaud that idea. But in one particular question, I think last year, wasn't there 4 bills down at the State House that addressed Metro districts and was trying to make them a little less onerous? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 2 of them passed. But they were the 2 that didn't have much teeth in them, and the 2 that failed to get passed were the ones that really would have helped us. So I'm wondering what is left on the table that we're not discussing yet that was in those 2 bills. So my question to you is, do you remember those bills? Do you know what was left on the table? And you might want to write it down later because it's a big question and might take some research, but there was definitely reform. I couldn't think of the word reform. There was bills to reform Metro districts at the state level last year that failed. And I'd like to see what those reforms are before we approve our own reforms. So if you could do that, I'd love it.
Will do. It's funny, I came prepared to talk about the ones that passed, but not the ones that didn't pass. So I will look into them.
Thanks.
I wonder if maybe somebody on our legislative committee may have a little context on that too.
I have a point of clarification.
Councilor Olver was on the legislative committee.
Right. I was on that committee.
I have a point of clarification, which is, Mr. Parker, in your presentation, you did specifically rate, you did list the things that passed, the reforms that did happen at the state level. And then you had another slide that was the list of, here are things we should still consider, correct? Or we could still consider, rather.
Yeah, actually, I didn't take off the thing. I called out one of them and I failed to call out the other. So the 2 areas of change recently at the state level, one is additional information for upcoming elections. So requirement for notifications for upcoming elections. And that really speaks to that first additional information slide that I did, although our recommendation is really more about notification with property transactions. So it's really different than what the state did. The other one, though, we spent a lot of time in 21 talking about avoiding Metro districts being a profit center for developers through interest rates and long-term loans and paybacks. And that really was handled last year with Senate Bill 23-110. So I don't know that there's a need to go further down that road.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Stewart.
Thank you so much for this. I did, like Councilor Sharzai, watch that October 2021 meeting and I watched the study session before where the policy was presented and really tried to dig in and understand it, as I was hoping to be about ready to get on council myself, and revisited the entire ordinance this last summer when we were looking at potential approval of a new metro district. So all of that to say, I am very, very open to kind of revisiting all of the proposed suggestions from that previous ordinance that are still relevant, but I will flag that the ones that are the most intriguing to me, that kind of get at the heart of the issue and why there's some discomfort, and how we can kind of hold developers accountable when they need to utilize this tool. Because again, I want to be very clear, this is a tool, and sometimes a necessary one, I think. And so I am most interested in number 2, kind of looking at transition of metro district boards from developer affiliate members to majority end user developers. I think that one is really, really critical, and one that I'm very, very interested in. Number 3 as well, because I think that speaks very directly to number 2 in the suggestions. And then I know we just talked about how perhaps number 4 is not as necessary anymore, but that's a really, really important one. So would love just a little bit more information and context later on from staff about whether or not any of the specifics in number 4 still need to be addressed, to make sure that there's no profiting off of the development of the metro district, because that seems to be kind of the biggest issue, is that circular, creating a metro district, profiting off of it, maintaining control, continuing to profit off of it. And I think those 3 out of all of them are the ones that I'm the most interested in seeing. But again, if we need to look at all of them because it all fits together and it makes sense to look at all of them, I'm very open to that. Those are just the ones that I think would probably be the most effective at addressing some of the issues.
Councilor Sink.
Thank you. Same slide that Councilor Stewart was referencing. One point you had was limit upfront Tabor elections. And I needed a little bit more clarity on that. So initially I'm thinking, what can metro districts then decide within themselves what they do with Tabor? But I don't know that I'm thinking correctly on that. Could you help me on that a little more?
Yeah, and I'm trying to pull up my notes on that, but effectively, the creation of metro districts requires a Tabor election at the beginning in order to create the metro districts and create the debt, or the ability to take on debt. However, the recommendation that was proposed in 21 was limit the amount of debt that the metro district could take as an initial board, and limit the Tabor election to that level of debt. And so it's not a universal Tabor, it's not a total Tabor election, in that if they want to go beyond that level, they need to have an election later with the resident or the end user control.
Yeah, so again, just to clarify, so metro districts, special districts, can then decide within themselves what to do with Tabor. Is that a correct summary?
In a way, yes.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Councilor LeBure.
Thanks, Mayor. and thanks, Counselor. Excuse me, Jeslyn. Sorry. For just sort of opining a little bit about, how we got back to this discussion. I gotta say, had a little heartburn when I saw it back on the agenda. I was on the development committee when we helped draft this stuff, and in my view, it was a better ordinance than what we had, and I think everybody essentially agreed that it was better than the status quo. The way I remember it is that people just essentially came down to the idea that they weren't going to support it because there just wasn't support in the community at that time for metro districts, or there was a lot of frustration with metro districts. So I think we threw our hands up a little bit and said, let's just move on. But I certainly would love to compare, some of the old language to some of the new language. So if we have that old 2021 ordinance, I wouldn't mind taking a look at it. And I would just echo what Councilor Stewart said about, just sort of all the different recommendations that you mentioned, Director Parker. I would be, I'd like to look at all those or be in support of us having sort of all of those in that in a future draft ordinance, if that makes sense. And then also state laws, if there's ones that we might think are duplicative, maybe if we can, and I probably maybe just need to do better research in your document here, but I'd like to just sort of compare and contrast those, relative to this new draft ordinance as well, just to make sure that, that there's, no sort of loopholes or things like that we should be concerned about. Because I do worry that state legislation might be a little bit more broad and might be a little looser than something that we might be able to craft. But anyway, thanks everyone, and thanks Director Parker for your information and presentation.
Councilor Nystrom.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I would echo what Councilor LaBure just said. I'm admittedly not as informed as a lot of people, and I would like to see some of the materials that were provided previously as a kind of a compare and contrast scenario. And I guess to me, it just feels a little too general still. And I guess Director Parker, one specific question I have is I read a lot about disclosure on the Metro District and the amount of fees involved. And, can you clarify for me, because my understanding is that the disclosure to prospective buyers comes very late in the process, like within closing documents. And to me, that just doesn't feel like adequate information for a home buyer. So if you could clarify that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, so that's one of the proposals, is to set that, and we could certainly set that at a time that council finds is appropriate. I'd need to look into when information it is possible to share information with prospective buyers, but certainly I don't see any reason it couldn't be done well before closing.
Thank you.
Councilor Miyagi-Guerrero.
Thank you. I think as we're looking towards kind of what potential next steps are in this, I just want to also voice my support and align myself with some of the other things that have been said. I think another component, in addition to, I think this point about disclosure, the point Councilor Stewart made about like that cycle of profit, is also just the overall like regulatory process. Is there currently a standardized way that metro districts, their governing board, their profit, their all of the different aspects that they are regulating or like operating, is that reported in a concise way, like regularly or uniformly anywhere?
Generally, no. We do get some, I think, annual reports from metro districts, but I don't know that there right now is a requirement for that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. So we end up in a place where, like, essentially, if we have good actors, we end up getting more information. So I think that's another thing that I have on my list is like that, the process of oversight. And I think the other component that was in the presentation about their own governance is a really important one as well. So I just wanted to uplift those points. And yes, I will say, I think that there was, that metro districts is something that it took me a little longer than some of the other things that we work on to fully wrap my head around, because I think it makes a lot of sense to me why this conversation sparks such intensity from our constituencies. And I know that it is one of the feelings about, so ask staff a lot of questions and get your head around it, because there are some components where you won't allow yourself, at least for me, I wouldn't allow myself to fully believe. I think that cycle of profitability that Councillor Stewart to relearn like 3 or 4 times, not because I could understand it, but because it doesn't seem, it works so differently than all of these other types of districts that we have. And so I found that difficult to grapple with. So really excited that we're reading this. I'm really looking forward to the
Councillor Mayagro, you're cutting out a little bit.
That is unfortunate. My internet appears to be having a hard time. This might help. I'm still here. That's why I had my camera off earlier. I couldn't listen. I couldn't hear people's words well with my camera on. So does this help?
Yeah.
Well, apologies. Yes, the internet is doing something very strange today. My phone is also having a hard time. The main point, I think that I started to break off towards the end of my comments and questions, correct? Just based on faces. Right. Okay. So I want to just reiterate that I'm very excited to dig into this with you all. And I think looking at the governing, the transparency, like the governing bodies and how they change, the transparency and oversight in that process of like what we get reported regularly and what is tracked, and that cycle of profitability, that all things that have been mentioned here are I think of the greatest importance, or at least what I have thought most about already as we're looking towards kind of how to figure out.
Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Parker, for the presentation. Very helpful. This is a sufficiently in the weeds topic, but also something I think we have heard about from our constituents that I just wanted to pull back for 1 minute. And for each of these, I guess for each of these recommendations, there's kind of sort of a plain language implicit problem that we're trying to solve. And I thought it might be worth just naming it in plain language for a moment and making sure that I'm on the right track. So I guess my interpretation of these recommendations is, number one, improve metropolitan district information disclosure to potential end users. That's basically, we want to make sure that if you're buying a property in a special district, you're fully, the fact that the potential sort of taxation or additional taxes that you could be subjected to are part of the disclosure process, and you're not surprised by that later down the road. Number two, require transition of metro district boards from developer affiliate members. That's basically, we want to make sure that the developer doesn't have too much power, or if they're fundamental in creating the metro district, that they quickly get off the board and aren't fundamental in how metro districts are governed going forward from that point. require Metro District Board selection information to be effectively provided to end users. That's basically, and make sure that when we have elections, this stuff is transmitted in the mail with enough time for people to actually participate in the election. Number 4 and number 5 are basically limit the amount of initial loan debt taken on when the Metro District might be fairly influenced by developers, so that doesn't shape the amount of debt and sort of provide too much of a debt burden going forward from that time forward. Number 6, determine how City Council provides oversight. That's basically several provisions to give the City Council a little bit more direct oversight over the proposed service plan. 7, self-evident limit eminent domain, and 8, I actually have no idea what that one is about. Multi-district structures, that one was obscure to me. How did I do on a very quick summary of like a plain language, like what problem are we trying to solve? And is there anything that I'm like missing that's critical in terms of like problems that this set of recommendations is aimed at addressing? Because I guess I just want to name for anyone that tunes into this later or is watching the problems that we're trying to solve here.
I appreciate that. That was really well done, Councilman.
Is there anything else I missed in terms of sort of just big picture challenges that I didn't name or you would add, Mr. Barker?
No, I think really this comes down to information disclosure and control of end users, right? That's really what this is about. It's limiting this from being a tool for developer profit or a tool for developer control.
Got it. Is there anything, this seems like sort of one, as the last recommendation, this doesn't seem like the most fundamental recommendation, but is there anything you want to add on prohibit multi-district structures? That one, I was kind of at a loss about what that was addressing or describing.
Yeah, and what I can do is I can bring an example of that from the past to a future meeting, but basically in its simplest form, consider that you create 2 districts. One is one piece of property and the other is, hundreds of pieces of property surrounding it. Taxes are created from the larger district, but how they're spent is controlled in the smaller district. And so if you create it that way, then even after you turn over the board in the larger district, they're still taxing their residents. All of that money is spent by the developer or whoever controls that single lot in the small district. So this has been done a couple times in different ways, and for apparently legitimate reasons. But I think the idea here is to prevent that type of structure where control of the money is limited to the control of the money raised from a large area is limited to a smaller.
And on the debt point specifically, I mean, again, just sort of say it in plain language, and I might get this slightly off, so please correct me. The concern about taking on too much debt initially, even if you don't do a tabor election or impose some sort of tax on the special district residents or businesses, you take on too much debt, you're basically going to force the special district board in future years. You're going to leave them no choice but to create a set of taxes or a revenue stream to pay off that debt, or force the entire special district to go bankrupt. Is that basically the reason that you want to limit debt?
Yeah, I think avoiding, the city council approves so the example would be the city council approves a metro district that is intending to take on $10 million in debt. And then 6 months later, the developer controlled board says, oh, we're going to take another $10 million in debt. Right. And so now what the city council approved 6 months ago is now doubled.
I see.
Right. But not by end users. And so I think the thought is whatever is identified in that first plan, that's what it's limited to until end users are in control. And then if the residents want to take on more debt, they can do it. But it's their choice.
Right. Well, thank you. I mean, certainly ideally before final ordinance reading as we dig into this. I mean, not now necessarily, but I would love a little more visibility on like what special districts or metro districts we think are most in the queue. I mean, from some of the previous comments, I have some sense of which ones we're focused on, but I think it would be good to just have a sense of the pipeline that's driving the urgency of this. This seems like a very sensible package of recommendations. I mean, the the reason this was voted down to in 2021, I wasn't there. I didn't watch the meeting, but it seems to be, well, this doesn't completely solve the problem, so let's just not try to partially solve the problem, which doesn't strike me as a particularly good reason to vote something down. So I would definitely be for trying to make this better before additional metro districts come before city council. So thank you for lifting this up and presenting this to all of us, Mr. Parker.
Councilor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, for a great explanation, and thank you, Councilman Lowe, for getting us the big picture piece to it. I want to dive a little bit more into some of the specifics on your recommendations on the disclosures on your staff, on the staff memo. I like all the disclosures, and I would like us to make sure that we're looking at the previous 2021 and compare that to what has been passed since, to make sure that we're capturing all of the disclosures. For example, one of the things that I wasn't sure was really in there, I think there's some aspect in the state law for the website disclosures, but I want to make sure we're capturing that it's for any developer, because of course the Metro District is its own entity and it may have one developer or may have many developers, and so we want to make sure that it's captured on anybody's website who's selling property. And then the other aspect is that any of this is disclosed by any seller of property within a metro district. So for example, that it's captured on the MLS or any other listing piece, because of course we know the MLS may be not as robust, or may not be with us for the way we're thinking about it now, given the different lawsuits around the country. And then making sure that we're picking up, and I think we are picking up from what you're proposing here, all the disclosure information from Senate Bill 23-110. And I won't profess to be an expert on all of that, but I think you're capturing all of that. And then on number 2, for the transition aspects of it, there's a couple pieces there that I really am focusing on. You asked the question of whether we want all the board members to commit to resigning, and I certainly would be in favor, as I sit here now, that all of them would resign. Those would be the board affiliate or the developer affiliated board members. And then I want us to pay very close attention to what the definition of a developer affiliated board member is. I would like to make sure that we're defining it in such a way that it does not that anyone who owns property that was not an arm's length transaction. So for example, it's not uncommon, and there's nothing nefarious in a lot of these, where a developer will say, in return for some services, for example, that you're providing me, I'm going to give you an ownership or temporary ownership or in a number of pieces of property. And frankly, they're an investment vehicle that you can now sell, presumably at a profit if the project goes well. I want to make sure that we're capturing only arm's length transactions as the folks who get to vote, and not these other side deals here. And then for B, under 2B, I want to make sure that we're limiting those who are part of that selection to those who are not the developer affiliated board members, so that we're not allowing that influence to continue on for just another cycle there. And then for 3, the website, I think, again, needs to be prominent. And I think there should be a self-nominating form that should be available on a website that's easy to happen. And the election process should be very easy as well. I mean, we've made it very simple in Colorado, and I love that about Colorado, that we can vote. It's not a bunch of obstacles that you have to jump through. That's not necessarily the case in voting within a special metro district. And so I want to make sure that it's a very easy process. With the loan, I was unclear. So I know the Senate bill provides all of these different options that, number 4 lists all those options that you list in your staff memo. I didn't know if we're required to provide all of those options, or if we can decide, no, we really don't want to provide a market rate, or, again, I'm hoping at some point you can give some more explanation there. And then for number 5, the debt, I would say yes, and for permitted uses only. So not only do we have a limit as to what that initial debt is, but that we have an understanding as to what that money is being spent, is what that debt's for, and that the city staff has an opportunity to review that to see whether that's an appropriate expense, really going to truly infrastructure matters and not for other matters that perhaps would not be necessary for a special metro district. B, I answer that one as yes, and C as yes as well. For 6, oversight, you've impressed upon me in many discussions that it's one thing to have to get information and to have community involvement, for example. It's another thing if you get to do anything about it. So having the reports, I think, is very helpful, but I'd like to know what's the repercussions that will come back if, for example, you uncover something that maybe is not quite as kosher as we would like to see it. Then 7, I don't know the answer to this, and perhaps this is a legal question, but on the eminent domain, can we decide that in the city of Lakewood, we are not going to delegate or provide the power of eminent domain to a special metro district? Or do we have to say, yes, you get it because the state law says something about it, but that we will be the final arbiters as to whether you get to exercise that power of eminent domain? That would be a question. Number 8, perpetual control. I'm still fuzzy on the multi-district structures. My thought is that we don't allow it for, frankly, any aspect of it, and we don't tie metro districts or link metro districts to each other so that you can avoid that in the first place. And then finally, one of the pieces that I thought was really good in the proposed language for the in 2021 that didn't pass, the proposed amendment was to put language in there to make it perfectly clear that just because you check all the boxes on a special metro district, that we, the city of Lakewood, do not have to approve it. So just because you meet all the characteristics or all the requirements of it, we could still say no. Or we could say, yes, this is a great project and we want it to go forward. Because, for example, we may decide that we want to have a special metro district that has all sorts of wonderful affordability issues, green certifications, all the things that we would love to see in the city. And we say, by gosh, by golly, this is a great one. But perhaps one doesn't, perhaps one is just luxury market rates. And we say, this isn't really what we feel like belongs in the city of Lakewood, or that we are not too thrilled about. So we're going to say, no, this is just not a metro district that excites us. So to the extent we can provide some language on there to make it perfectly clear that this is not an automatic, I would love to see that. So I hope, Mayor, I didn't go past my 5 minutes. I tried to go quickly enough to.
Oh, you did.
Thank you.
You did, but you asked a lot of questions. So,
and I'm not expecting answers now, just so that we could get that report. And I guess, I'm sorry, Mayor, I interrupted. If I may be permitted to say one thing. I think there is some urgency because of some of the projects that people have described. It sounds like there's a lot of things that we still need to see, and maybe it would be helpful to see a draft of the ordinance before it goes to a first reading. And maybe that requires another study session before I know it's already teed up on there, but it sounds like there's still some things to see, and it's hard to be able to say, yes, I can 100% get behind this at this point. And I'd hate to have a second reading and we have 300 different amendments we all want to make, and it's a scramble. Just a thought. I'll hush.
okay. So it sounds to me like we're all in agreement. Well, actually, I should say, before I transition over to that, Director Parker, want to also say thank you and the team for bringing this back. Likewise, in August, when we thought we were going to be voting on it, it was like, wait, there were changes that were proposed that we know were creating more robust levels of supervision or accountability and transparency and all those things. And it felt really hard for us to have to decide to make, to vote on something without having a deeper conversation about what those improvements were intentionally or originally going to be. So very glad you guys are back with this topic tonight. We all, it sounds like, agree that we do want an added layer of oversight above and beyond what state law has in place now. So I would kind of start, figuring out our next steps with the suggestion that what I'm hearing tonight is we'd like to know more about what state law changes have been. We'd like to know how that aligns with what's already in the ordinance or the possible ordinance. And I'm wondering if maybe our next step would be something that includes like a write-up of what the state law changes have been. I heard 2021 and 2023. And then a proposed ordinance, and maybe even providing a link to the meeting in 2021, that October meeting in 2021 that had a lot of conversation, and we heard more about that vote. I think some of our counselors that have not seen that meeting yet would appreciate the opportunity to do that. Can I see, by show of hands, everybody so far, am I hitting it on the head? Like everybody thinking, yep, this sounds like so far good. Okay, so we have consensus there. And then I guess my question would be, so the process, there's a study session, or there's bringing it forward and starting with the first hearing. And I'll just take a second for our new counselors to talk a little bit about what the process looks like. Is that, in an ordinance, we come forward with the draft ordinance, we have the first reading, that doesn't have a public hearing. We don't talk about it in the meeting. It's really just a notice of publication. Then we come back for the second hearing, and that's when we go through the amendments. So typically we tend to get through that whole ordinance in that process. However, we have had, a circumstance last year with our short-term rentals where it was elongated some. So it didn't go through in just the 2 meetings. Dave, with all the questions and thoughts that you had, sorry, Councilor Ryan, I land on the idea of a study session. However, a few people have also made note of the time sensitivity of this element, and obviously a study session is going to prolong this. So my question would be for council, what are your thoughts between those 2 processes? And I'll start with Councilor Matt Guerrero.
Thank you. And let me know, I think my internet is fixed. I reset my router. So I think that I defer a little bit to people in wards that have a more acute attention to this right now. So I'll put that out there in terms of the timeliness, but I do think that given the complexity of this, and I think that it's very likely we will end up with sort of a long series of red line type amendments on something like this. And what we've seen in the past is, given that we have 2 readings, not 3. So in the legislature, there's 3. In the state legislature, there's 3 readings, which allows for that first posting, and then a second, which is really amending, and then a third reading where you pass the fully amended version and incorporate all the amendments. And the public gets to see that ahead of you voting, and you get to see that ahead of you voting. So to me, if we're able to get it on the schedule in a timely way, and I do agree that it's fairly urgent, to be able to do a study session or even a workshop style with like the first drafted language, I think would be best. Again, I defer a bit if others have like more urgency based on their constituencies and wards. But I feel like when we've done these sort of really big, really like detail oriented, sometimes somewhat tedious to get the details really right, we end up in this place where we're trying to amend on the second reading, which is also the final reading. And we ourselves have to be able to incorporate that intellectually and like understand what's happening still in that moment. And then the public does not get an opportunity to also intellectually incorporate all of those amendments before we pass. So we end up with comments and follow-ups from folks confused about the process and frustrated about certain aspects of the program or bill or ordinance that we were working on that we actually did fix. And so I think that given, again, that this is something that people really pay attention to and that there's so many moving parts to it, if we're able to afford the time, I think that a study session or a workshop with the first draft would be ideal.
Okay, Councillor Lowe.
One thought, loosely held. Gosh, it totally makes sense that we need some engagement on the ordinance language. We have a lot piling up on our calendar, which is great. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of discussions about study sessions, workshops. For this one, I wonder what do you, Mayor Stromer or Council or Mr. Parker think about like an ad hoc committee for this? Like, I mean, it certainly seems like Councilor Ryan has a lot of very specific thoughts. It seems like we're all pretty aligned on like generally we want this to happen, but like the details matter. I wonder, and I don't know if it's functionally how we would do it like here or later, but what if we like assign, I nominate Councilor Ryan and maybe a couple of other folks from council to kind of do like an ad hoc session or two with Mr. Parker and with our city attorney's office to kind of like groom the language a little bit to get it to a point where it's ready to come to council. I know that's not how we usually do things, but this just strikes me as a place where maybe it could actually streamline things, or not, just an idea.
Councillor Stewart.
I think I would be in the most support of, if we can do this with some urgency, a workshop style meeting. Because I do think that these are things that we need to kind of hash out in a less formal setting and actually have someone there kind of taking notes about what needs to, I think it would be wise to have draft ordinance language for us at a workshop that we can then potentially work off of to redline and then bring to first reading ordinance. So if we can do that in a timely manner, that feels like the best way to react with some urgency. I do think it would be very, very wise to have a draft ordinance in front of us that we can literally sit there and redline in a workshop setting. I think would probably be the best and what I would be supportive of.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan. You're muted, Councillor. Councillor Ryan, you're mute.
Everything I said was brilliant, and of course now less brilliant. I was just going to say I like Councillor Lowe's suggestion. I'd be happy to be part of an ad hoc committee or workshop or whatever label we're throwing on that. And I agree with Councillor Stewart's thought that we really need to see a draft of what it is that we're looking at before a workshop can make any sense. You can't. I don't know what I say until I see what I say is kind of that adage, and I think that makes sense. In terms of if something comes up in the meantime on our agenda in terms of a special, in terms of Metro District, my plan, just to let the world know, is I plan on tabling that. A resolution or an ordinance that to put one on there until we get this figured out.
Okay, so we have two options on the table, a workshop or an ad hoc committee. So if everybody can get out preferably these if we have them. What I'd like to do is count who workshop versus ad hoc committee.
Mayor, could you tell us what the difference is? Because I don't know, practically speaking, what the difference is that I'd be voting on.
Yeah. So a workshop setting is more of an informal, we would be together in person, most likely in the council room, not chambers, but the conference room, where we would just go through section by section together. It's a really great tool when you really want to pick apart some pieces and just have a really open dialogue, so that we would all, what that would look like is we would have the documents, we would have the information ahead of time. We could have a video of the October meeting. We could have what the state laws are. We could have a draft of the ordinance. I would even encourage you to submit all of your questions so that we could each look through and kind of think through what those would be, or our thoughts, and even voice those out with some of our residents. And we just go through it pretty informally, but pretty granularly together. That's one meeting. Then we end up coming back. So I don't want to put a timeline on it because there's a lot of things going on, but say a few weeks later, few meetings later, and we would then have the first reading and then the second. So that versus you send it to a committee. Now you've got a smaller group of people that meet once, maybe twice, who knows? It's up to the committee to decide. Then it would come back to council, but at this point, council hasn't all seen it. So there may still be some consternation with some of the people that hadn't been on the committee. When we do a workshop together, we come together and we're all having that conversation in the same room. So the workshop could be a little bit quicker, and it could be an opportunity for everybody to dive in, versus the committee, the dive in happens where it's just a few folks. Councillor Nystrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my hesitation, or where I'm kind of stuck right now, is I don't see this as a higher priority than some of the other items that we discussed over the weekend. And, granted, we don't have the readout from all of that yet, but, I think, quite honestly, the inclusionary zoning, fee in lieu type topics are more urgent and more, I guess, impactful up front right now. So I don't disagree with, I would definitely like to see more granularity with this and understand the specifics a lot better, but I also don't see this as the highest priority item right now. But again, I'm sure that's constituent based as well, but it's just my thoughts on that.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
Sorry, I know you're trying to land the plane here, Mayor. I said at the outset my ad hoc committee idea was a very lightly held. I mean, I threw it out there to see if there was sort of process efficiency to be gained from that. Hearing you talk through the options, it sounds like there actually probably isn't, because enough members of council still want to wordsmith this that even if we send it to an ad hoc committee, the rest of council is still going to want to weigh in on a resolution on ordinance language. So that's true, and there's time sensitivity here, and we want to get this resolved before other things that might be in the queue come before council. I actually think I've been talked out of my own idea, which is just a workshop to sort of wordsmith this collectively is probably more efficient and cuts out a step. So sorry for waffling or flip-flopping, but I think I probably wouldn't even vote for my own idea at this point.
It's the beauty of group dialogue. Councillor Mayotte Guerrero.
Yeah, I wanted to say I really appreciate Councillor Nystrom's attention to capacity. I think seeing all of our ideas and priorities coming from constituents up on the flip charts and walls over the weekend for our retreat was very impactful in terms of understanding just the amount of things that we need to do that are really directly impacting people. And so I do really appreciate that. I also will say that not all of those priorities are things that actually aren't moving. And so I do think that, again, given that we actually postponed voting on a metro district last year once, that this isn't an issue that if we don't get ahead of it, we end up in this position where we're then like pressured by potential metro districts to figure a thing out that should actually, I think, take time. So to me, the urgency isn't like, oh, we need to pass this in 2 months. To me, the urgency is we need to learn about this starting now, because this is an issue that comes up, and then you like don't, and then you're ill prepared. But we can see it coming, and so I definitely am in favor of a workshop model. And I want to say in particular, a lot of the housing things. I mean, we should just have a broader conversation, but the housing committee, which I'll share more in the committee update today, but is working on like how to set forward sort of like an agenda and recommendations for you all to react to and influence. So I just, on that one in particular, I know that those conversations are starting to move.
Councilor Over.
Yeah, I'd give the new people my experience on the campaign finance ad hoc committee last year, whenever it was. We met a lot, it seems, and we spent a lot of time, and we went over everything from front to back every time, and we hardly changed anything. And then we brought it in front of council, and then there was amendments, and it wound up being pretty much we did a couple of good things, but overall it was waste of time. Wasted time, not a waste of time, but wasted time. And so like I would rather have a workshop than an ad hoc committee. And I'd like to see actually Ward 4 people and Ward 1 people being on top of the game there, because quite simply Rooney Valley is going to be a place where metro districts formed and are used, and also the federal center. So and there might be some other places in the other districts, but those immediately come to mind as something that's coming up soon. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor LeBeer.
I was just going to say, after a year of working on this last time, my preference would be neither of the above, but I'm happy to go with the group. So thanks.
Okay, so let's start vote on the workshop. Can you, a few of you just verbally said what you would like to do, but if you would like to move forward in a workshop format, green arrow, please. Or thumbs up. Councilor Nystrom, do you have a vote either way? Thank you. Did you capture that, Ms. Hodgson or Mr. Parker? You get everybody? Okay. All right, so it looks like we move forward with a workshop.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, questions? Parker?
I will share that we may try to move this along relatively quickly. There was some question about what's coming and what the time sensitivity is. The issue that we haven't really talked about, the issue with metro districts is always a timing one, in that applicants can only apply once a year for a metro district because it has to go to a vote in November. And so working backwards, the way that these work is they have to go to a vote in November. They have to come to council by August in order to get on the ballot for November, which means they have to apply to staff by about April at the latest in order to get to council in July or August in order to get on. So it is likely, as Mr. Over pointed out, that you will see a couple of metro district applications come into staff in April, hoping to come to council by July or August. And so that, I think that's the time constraint that we're under. And tabling them is effectively a denial for the year.
Councilor Ryan.
Yeah. I think you just answered the question at the last piece there, that it's effectively a denial. It's not one of these situations like we were talking about with another development where they're able to rely upon the existing ordinances and that we had no ability to change it. That would not be the case here with the Metro District, where they'd be able to say, we get to follow the state law because you had no law, and you don't get to change it on us.
You can choose to process them without having created new, because that's how it's been done in the past, right? This city has never had a policy for these, and they just determine whether they approve that service plan. You can do that without these policies being adopted, but it will certainly give the applicants more guidance on what to bring to you if you've adopted some policies.
Councilor Cruz.
Thanks. Yeah. I just want to make sure, because I have the same question as Councilor Ryan. So let's say we were to receive an application in the midst of us doing this update. Essentially, if we were to change that, like, would there be an opportunity for the applicant to adjust their application to meet our new guidelines, or effectively are we not able to kind of apply any new guidelines we would have? I just want clarity.
This isn't the same as, you can apply, you're going to make an up or down decision. You can do it on, the criteria of your choice. And frankly, we are giving all of the applicants all the information, so they know what was on the table in 2021 and what is on the table now. And I think will come in doing their best to meet, what's on the table. So we'll let them know what's being discussed and what's probably, moving forward in terms of new regulations from City Council.
Does staff need anything else from City Council tonight?
No, I just wanted to answer the previous question about timing and the thoughts on time. We'll schedule the workshop.
Stay tuned. All right. Well, we did not have on our agenda this evening committee updates, and it's interesting, Councilor Mayotte-Guerrero, you mentioned committee updates. We used to have those in our study sessions. For our new counselors, that was regular meeting is where we go around and talk about our ward reports, and study sessions were where we would actually go into updates that were occurring on each of the committees. So if we have any committees that do want to report out, I would definitely open that up. Councilor Mayotte-Guerrero, you mentioned having something that you wanted to speak to on the Housing Policy Committee. So I'll let you start.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I hadn't even noticed it wasn't on there. Apologies, Mayor. I think I just expected it would be, but we're working on our policies and procedures, and so we'll have clarity, in a month or so on these things. So we had our first Housing Policy Commission meeting last week before the retreat. And it was really a discussion for us to be able to figure out our process and the way we want to prioritize things. And so the HPC is planning to really dig in on, basically, for lack of better words, what we've been calling the low-hanging fruit of the housing strategy plan. And essentially, we're each going to come prepared to discuss what our sort of top most urgent strategic housing plan priorities are for us to begin working on, with some staff support and information and context on those things, but with the idea specifically that we're looking at what are the things that we can probably recommend to council, where we would be able to move into having a study session, thinking about if there's ordinances we need to change or not, if it's things that just need staff direction from the full body of council, or whatever those processes are, but where it's not taking an exorbitant amount of money, and it is something where we have some or all, but like a majority of the information that we need on a topic. And then we would essentially try to figure out a bit of a prioritization, and then we'll come back to the full city council to be able to discuss that list and ensure that it feels sort of like the right order of operations to folks. And again, we'll have the idea is that we'll have within that sort of like, okay, here's the things that we think that the Housing Commission is going to go work on. We're going to learn, we're going to bring in experts, we're going to talk to community, et cetera, on these topics so that we can have a better understanding and get something a little closer so that then the full council can spend their time on a slightly more fully baked idea. Some concepts that are more like, these are relatively simple fixes. We think that we can all talk as a body and make recommendations to staff for the information or things that need to be changed. And then things that are like actually going to be ordinance shifts, but that we think we should prioritize. So we're trying to essentially put it into what will the actions of the whole need to be and what they are, and a little bit of the reasoning on that, so that then it's easier for us as a whole body to sort of start chipping away at our housing priorities. So we're starting with the things that are in the housing plan to guide that discussion. But I think, and there's a lot in there, but obviously then the retreat also brought some additional things, although a lot of things that are within that housing plan discussion actually were what other people who aren't on the HPC brought up. So there's a lot of hopefully good synergy there. Anything else, committee members, that's really important? I just wanted to flag that process is underway because I know it's on people's minds. And so we'll have more clarity for you after our next meeting, but I wanted you all to just have visibility that that's moving.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Shahrazad.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to take a second to recognize the Denver Regional Council of Governments just approved a priority climate action plan to submit to the EPA. And the focus of this is greenhouse gas reduction. So it's a regional approach. We applied for significant funding. And I bring this up because the City of Lakewood's planning department, in particular sustainability planning department, played a tremendous role in this. And I just want to show some gratitude. There was a lot of creative thinking in this, and we don't get many opportunities to celebrate like those innovations that are being lifted up. And then the second, I would just propose a challenge to you all. The screening committee has the joy of meeting some of the best and most engaged members of our community. And we are going to really work hard to recruit for various boards and commission vacancies that we have. We did have a deadline that closed on Friday, so we're going through some applications, but we surely have more vacancies to fill. And I would just implore all of you to please promote this in your newsletters, at your ward meetings, but this is a great way for community members to get involved. And we'd love to see a little geographic diversity in that representation. And so that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee reports tonight? All right. Well, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting at, well, let me check my script. I'm going off script. No further business. I'll adjourn the study session at 9:55. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.